Wow, I've never heard that before.
Yeah, it's for the students.
All right. Well, so Jen Weir in Chile, Minnesota. I met Jen. Well, I saw Jen before I met her. I wasn't stalking,
Mm.
but she was performing at the Sacramento, the North American Taiko Conference that was in Sacramento, I believe in 2003. And Mu Daiko, she was with Mu Daiko at the time, and they performed. Remember was it Maui, the Matsuri, the kids from Hawaii?
Oh yeah.
Just over the top. It was a great concert, and I saw Jen was doing, Mu Daiko was doing a piece called Journey to Toji Temple, which we then invited Mu Daiko to come to Tucson the next year, or 2 years later actually, and teach us that song and be part of our Southern Arizona Taiko Showcase. And that was how we were building audience and building repertoire. So the deal was that our guest artists would also teach us one of their songs and give us permission to play it. And so that's how we acquired Asobi, which means play. And right now we are learning that. I think Rachel has pretty much got that down now. So we're working on that with our performing understudies. We're still playing it, but Jen probably, I think she doesn't play it anymore, but it's okay. We're keeping it alive for you. And then we performed also at the Roundhouse in Vancouver. You were performing, and I saw her, and I was like, man, she's awesome. Even more awesome than when I saw her in Sacramento. Great energy, one of my favorite people to watch playing taiko, now with Enso Daiko up in Minnesota. And are you with Iris's group too now?
Yeah, sort of as a half-timer kind of.
Kind of a pick-up group.
Yeah.
So everybody, Jen Weir, our friend and the composer of Asobi, welcome to Tucson, Arizona via Zoom.
Thank
the way
you.
we're going to do this is I'm going to keep us muted, I'm going to keep us muted until you have a question or comment. Please, those of you who are listening, please feel encouraged to wave and ask questions and make comments. I'm only muting to keep the background noise down, but we want this to be a conversation as well.
Feel free to also type questions into the chat. We'll keep
Oh
that.
yeah, that'd be awesome.
Keep track of those as well. Excellent. So Jen, are you ready to take it away?
Sure. A little bit about Asobi. If I remember correctly, it's a very Jen Weirian kind of song with jumping and moving and such. And at the time, some of my students were very sort of flat-footed, and I wanted to make them jump and make them move as much as I could stand it. So that was sort of the goal behind that, to get people to loosen up and to feel more comfortable moving away from the drum. And to have a lot of improvisation, so they weren't sort of stuck into a certain kata, but that they could kind of be really have a lot of fun with it, and the structure would be loose enough that it could kind of evolve into whatever it needed to be. So it's cool that you're playing it. Thank you very much. That's awesome. My background, just to give you a little bit of context, let's see, I'm a Korean adoptee. I was raised in North Dakota, in Minot, North Dakota, and I've lived in Minneapolis my adult life. And I started out as an actor, wanting to do theater. And my running joke is that I could always act like a better taiko player than I was. In that way of having sort of performance skills, even if I didn't have the technical chops that a lot of taiko players have. And honestly, that's still the thing to this day. And so I have directed and do occasionally direct theater, and sort of taiko started to take over my life. For a while, I could balance and do both, and then eventually it became all taiko all the time. But the perspective I come from is very much a theatrical perspective, and similarly, our taiko group, Mu Daiko, was a part of, for much of its life, Theater Mu, which is an Asian American theater company. And so our whole performance model, rehearsal model, sort of the structure of the group was almost more aligned to a theater company than a taiko group in some ways. And then eventually they kind of split and evolved separately, and then Mu Daiko completely left Theater Mu and then became Enso Daiko, and now the Taiko organization is TaikoArts Midwest. That happened about 3 years ago. And so, but we still kind of have that sensibility, that theatrical sensibility, and that was, I would say that was the one of the things that I would call out as our strengths, even if sort of our technical playing ability could sometimes be masked by our theatrical approach or performance kind of production values in some ways. I basically you hide your weaknesses and you spotlight your strengths, and that was something that we could kind of do almost instinctively.
I would like everyone to take some notes on that right now.
And so it's interesting in that, like, we were always focused as a group to perform before we even knew what we were doing. So not all, but most of the group members who sort of gravitated towards us wanted to perform taiko. So there are a few people who are sort of like, I don't feel comfortable on stage, or it's not really my thing. I just want to do taiko. I don't necessarily need to be a performer or an artist. What does that mean? But we would always push those folks to that kind of that expectation of your relationship with the audience and how you craft that, and what your intentions are behind that.
Jen,
And so,
can I ask you to elaborate
yeah.
a little bit on that? So what do you feel was the benefit to pushing people? What for you, what for them? What was the hope?
Yeah, well, first of all, raise of hands, who's tried to write their own song? Anyone? Okay. Great. So for example, one of the things, like, we had a taiko lab several years ago, and my assignment was every single person has to write something. I don't care if it's a full amazing song or like a short solo that you wanted to create and just never had the time for, or just a section of a song or an idea for a song, but you have to present something original. And that freaked a lot of folks out. Naturally, and some lovely things came out of it. But having a performance date, meaning this is the day that the public is coming, that people are coming, no matter what state of rehearsal you are in, no matter how finished or not finished it is. This is the line in the sand. Having those performance dates really exponentially pushed people's development. So an idea that you might have in the back of your head that you're kind of working on in the background, you might get to in your spare time, and maybe in 2 years you might have something to show. Well, if you have a deadline of 6 weeks, suddenly that accelerates the energy you're going to put behind it, because it's terrifying to do something in front of people that you're not confident in. So you rise to the occasion for the most part. And so I found that even though we would rehearse year round, our skills and development exponentially accelerated towards a concert. And if we didn't have those sort of public concerts and public showings, we sort of would keep working, keep crunching, but it would never we would never level up with the same intensity. Obviously there are groups that have that intensity. Certainly in Japan, I know they live and breathe with that kind of intensity. But for us, most of us have day jobs or families or things like that, most people aren't doing taiko full time. You have a limited space for taiko, so you have to make the most of it. And so we found that forcing people to do a concert and even telling them, this song is going to be on the concert in 3 months, even though you haven't written it yet, so go, would push people to do what they normally wouldn't be able to do. So I would say it was a skill accelerator, even though it caused great anxiety, stress, tension, all that fun stuff. It really pushes people to show up because you have to. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. That was really great. Skill accelerator. I'm writing that down. Okay.
There's nothing like fear to motivate you, right?
I like to think of it as extreme nervousness.
Yeah. Well, I heard that that your physiological responses to anxiety and excitement are the same. So when you're feeling anxious, you can just say to yourself, oh, I'm so excited. And your body is feeling the same things. Interesting, eh?
I've heard that too.
Yeah, so what does that mean, like theatrical approach or performance values? What do you guys think that means to you? I mean, some of it's obvious, but I'm just curious.
I'm not going to talk on this one. Someone else has to.
Anything from the most obvious to the
Trent, oh, go ahead, Holly. Yes.
So it does, it ups the ante and it puts some pressure on, and it, I don't know, I'm thinking about for myself, when there's a show, I definitely have a different mindset than when I'm just playing. And I just know from my own experience, I go through different perspectives of, well, am I here to enjoy myself and be engaged in something really cool and fun? Or am I trying to become a performer? So I have to play back and forth, because I think, one of the things I hear is that your purpose of your group was very clear. We are a performing taiko group, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that seems to me to just have a slightly different focus than what many of, well, I can only speak for myself, but what it feels like is many of us have a different sort of desire and interest in playing.
Mm-hmm.
But most people also end up performing, and I see people respond to, oh, here we go. We've got to be ready. Let's do it. And so I get the feeling, and it is a motivator for sure.
Rachel?
Yeah, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Jen. We'll do Jen and go to Rachel. What were you going to say, Jen? I'm sorry.
Me?
Yeah.
I was just going to say, so I would say that's true of our performing group, but our student base of most of the students that come to our classes regularly, or at least before COVID did, I would say a good chunk of them would never have imagined themselves on stage. And as part of our philosophy, we would have a public student recital that we would book a theater, charge tickets, have lighting, do everything that we do for our concerts, in a different kind of format, in a recital type format. But that was very much a part of their learning, growing experience. And for some people that caused great palpitations, and some folks who said, honestly, I'm declining, I'll practice with you, but I don't want to perform. But most people found eventually, maybe not the first year, but maybe by the second or third year, the value in what that did for them. And, similarly to what you spoke to, like the way it brings your class together and your group together, you form kind of this like Taiko zone and Taiko kind of community where all you do and think is breathe as Taiko for that weekend. You find yourself doing more and risking more than you would in just a regular kind of class, no matter how diligent a student you are. And you start discovering things about yourself on stage. And so that has been sort of part of our curriculum, I guess, that there is sort of this public student recital that honestly students started then looking forward to it and sort of planning around it, even planning summer vacations around it and things like that. Okay, but back to the question, what does it mean, theatrical, performance values, production values? What does it mean to be theatrical as a Taiko group to you? Or what do you imagine that would mean?
I saw Rachel, did you have your hand up before? And Ishani?
I did. Some of what Jen said is kind of what I was thinking. But there's just a shift in mindset from playing in a class or as a group versus playing with a performance in mind. When you go to like a class as a student, you don't have the same responsibility. you're more singular. And then as a group, when you're preparing for a performance, you have to share that responsibility. You have to change your mindset to know what, like, the order, know where you're supposed to be. Everyone has to be a working piece of the machine in a more, I guess, streamlined way, and in a more like cohesive way than just let's play a song. And that, like you said earlier, with the heightening the skill and everything, it just puts you in that more direct focus mode.
Absolutely. Anyone else?
Yeah, I guess when I think about sort of the theatricality element of performance, to me that kind of feels like people come in, and I do a lot of work with our newer students who I am often yelling at them and coaxing them about, you should sign up for a performance, you should do this, you should smile, you should look happy when you play. And the art students on the call are running at me because they've heard it 1,000 times. But I think that to me is kind of where that theatricality comes in, is a lot of people don't necessarily think of themselves as being good enough or ready to perform. And I don't know that anybody necessarily, or most people don't ever feel fully ready to perform. And that might be true for the entirety of sort of someone's taiko career, but the theatricality aspect, as I see it, is maybe this idea that even when you're not ready, you step into this role of, in this moment, I am a taiko player. And in this moment, like, I am on stage doing the coolest thing, playing the coolest drums. And it doesn't really, like, I, Ishani, might still be like, oh gosh, I don't know how I feel about this. But in that moment, like, the theatricality aspect as it comes in is less about, am I ready for the performance, or am I like good enough to perform? It's about, can I put on the persona that lets me be on this stage and take up space and sort of do this thing, which I don't know if that's sort of what you were talking about in terms of like it not always being like, not always necessarily feeling solid on the technical skills, but feeling like you have that theatricality as a strength. But anyways,
Right. Yeah.
hint.
Who else?
I would say also, and I'm sorry my video is off, but that performance and the theatricality, like that part of it, is the time when I am most reminded that I am not just doing taiko for myself, right? Like, I can play the drum that I have at home and get all the benefits of playing taiko for myself, but that moment when there's an audience in front of you is when I'm reminded that I'm giving something to them. I'm not just here for me.
Yes, that's great. Who else? Who else? Holly.
Well, another piece of that too is, as soon as it becomes a show, the ensemble part of taiko becomes way more important. You know, the playing together, the helping one another, the making sure that everybody feels comfortable and confident, and can do their part, is, and that we're connected, that we're not all just playing in little silos on the stage, but that together we're presenting something else. Starts to feel like a big thing. And you know, I was thinking also about the motivation for people, and you know, I just over the years have noticed a difference. You know, I've always said my taiko career started as a mistake, and I wasn't driven to find taiko, but I found it, and then I got into it, and I just see my own experience as different when I see people who come in who have musical training, and people who know that they want to play drums or be involved in some kind of a group kind of thing, and the performance piece is more of a focus for them. I just see that some of that comes from our own prior experience. I'd never done performance art before. I'd never done anything musical before. And so there's a whole bunch of other learning
Yeah.
and motivation that comes or doesn't when that's your background. But if you come in and you're already a performer, or you already know that you want to do that, it's a whole different, it appears to be, to me, who, still struggles at times, like, oh, it's different for them because they want to do that and they're programmed to do that and they have experience doing that.
Yeah, it's coming in from different avenues,
Yeah.
coming in type of thing. Jen, I have a question for our group members to think about in connection to your question about theatricality. Is it just about playing the taiko? What else is theatrical about what we do? Rachel.
I don't know if this is the answer you're going for, but
Every answer counts.
Every answer counts.
there's a lot of problem solving you have to do when you're preparing for a performance. There's what was the question again? Can you repeat it? Sorry, I thought I had an answer, and now I'm worried. What else other than
Jen
taiko?
was talking about with a theatrical leaning into that theatrical thing. Is it the song? For me, my question to you, to build on that, for you to think about how we approach things as our group, is it just our songs that we're focused on the theatricality of, or is it other things?
Okay, so the transitions are a piece of it. Cleaning those up, working together. It depends on the venue, but who's talking when, lighting, other things to add in, things to entertain the audience, all those little other pieces that you have to have this. We have a 30-minute set, the whole thing, not just, playing a song.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's this idea that there's an experience that you're crafting, and in that you have this opportunity to interact with an audience. It's limited opportunity. So what you do with that time and how you interact with them becomes part of the whole experience. So from the moment, some would say, well, let me back up. So of course we know that taiko is a folk tradition, and so there's where you come out at a bone and everybody dances the same and dances and drums, and they all know these rhythms and they've known them forever, and you could feel like an ensemble with your entire village or your entire community of all ages and all skills. And you're communicating and in some ways performing. But when you take it to the stage, like whatever that stage is, whether it's, an indoor theater or an outdoor theater, whatever that is, there's an evolution, because the theater comes with its own history, tools, expectations, institutions. So it's this idea of in a traditional theater, I buy a ticket. I get it at the box office. I find my seat. I sit down. I look at a program. We see a show. The lights come up. And at the end of the show, the lights go down. We leave. Maybe we get to say hi to people in the lobby. There's this whole experience around it, and you can kind of set an expectation based on that. It's a different experience if you go to your kid's recital at school, in a gym, with folding chairs. You have a different kind of experience, a different kind of expectation. They can be just as meaningful. So it's neither one or the other, but it's this idea of crafting an experience. So when you think about, all right, what are we going to name the concert? Is the concert name give you a sense of what you're going to experience? Does it inspire you? Does it, what kind of things does that bring? What's the environment that you walk in? What's the feeling that you get? Is there music playing in the background? Is it lively, or is it very traditional and serious? Is there an MC? Is the MC funny? Is the MC relaxed? Is the MC just very straightforward? What are those things? How you do the transition from song to song, how you craft the evening. Do we start out with a bang? Do we start out soft and build? What's the arc of the show? What kind of emotional journey do you want to take people on? you know, like for example, when I craft a show, I usually start big and have the first two numbers be kind of big and high energy, then feel like people need maybe a break and go into the more movement or melodic or experimental pieces, and then end with, for sure, a big number with everybody on stage. So there's sort of an arc in terms of how you kind of craft that 30-minute, 45-minute, or 2-act kind of experience, where you're thinking about, okay, when are they going to be tired? When are they going to need a break? When can we sneak in something that's kind of funky and modern and not what they're expecting? Where do we put the song that we're most confident? Where do we put the song that we're the least confident and know that everyone's really thinking hard through? And kind of putting that in order, then looking at, oh, where do the drums need to move and where the drums need to be to make that work and not need 20 minutes to reset things? Oh, what costumes are we going to wear? How do they look on all of our different body types? How do they reflect the identity of our group? How do they affect the music that we're playing? Then of course, lighting. What kind of lighting designer are we working with? What's their style of lighting? What's their philosophy behind lighting? Do they know how to light taiko players? Do they know how to light rock concerts instead? You know, like what kind of feel do you have for that? How much money do we have to spend on any of this? Do we want a set in the background? Do we want fabric? Do we want banners? Do we want it to look traditional? Do we want it to look modern? Like all of those questions craft that experience, right? And then kind of going back to what you guys were talking about, then there's the how do you approach it as a performer? How do you evolve from a student to a performer, or from a performer to a better performer, or from a performer to an artist? What does that look like? And what does that mean to you, both individually and as a group? And for me, I found personally, and this is where the sort of public student recitals have reaffirmed this for me, is that it's not about how good you are. It's about how much you share yourself. And so when you watch a student recital, you can see those intro, you know, beginning students. Some of them are just like lit up, and you can tell they're having the time of their lives, even if their kaws are funky and their arms are flailing, you know. And then there's some people that you can tell they're students. They know exactly what they're doing. They've been there a long time. They're playing everything perfectly, but I have no idea who they are. I have no idea why they play taiko. You know, so there's a big range, and yes, skill has a lot to do with it, and that's your toolbox, but it's also, for me, how much of yourself do you show? What kind of risks are you giving? How are you making that connection? Is it through your body? Is it through your face? Is it through your melody? You know, what are you trying to say or share with that audience? And you know, a composer will have an idea, and maybe everyone who's working on that song together have the same idea as the composer. Maybe they have different ideas. Then you have the whole feel of the entire concert together that you want. And then you have these individual moments that you want to craft, like from the moment that the curtain opens, what kind of feeling is that? Where are we standing? How are we standing? Who hits the first note and why? And the final thing, sort of with the whole transitions, yes, blocking, drums moving, how they move, where they move, what's the look on stage, how do you know, craft the set. At the end of the day, for me, is regardless of all of that being impeccable or completely chaotic, is as an audience member, am I moved? Did you move me to feel? Period. You know, sometimes a show can be so polished and impeccable, but utterly not engaging on a visceral level. And sometimes things can be raw and amateurish and utterly like you feel it in your bones, you know? So all of this theatricality and performance skills are tools that help you amplify your message and what you're trying to say, but they're not the only way to do it. You know, it's one way, it's one sort of philosophy of how to do that. As you can tell, for me, it's like something I think about a lot and get really excited about it. And you make all these decisions, and maybe nobody knows, but you're trying to do this and trying to do that. And you're also trying to communicate it so that everybody in the group knows why we're doing this instead of I just told you so. right? But yeah, all of that is trying to create something that is bigger than yourself, that's bigger than one person, that's bigger than one song. It's trying to create a feeling, it's trying to create a connection, it's trying to create instill emotion or a journey of some sort. So I get really, really pissed when I go to a taiko show, a live taiko show, and if I leave unmoved. I just get mad because I'm like, oh, you just wasted this opportunity of one of the most accessible art forms I feel in the world, you know, Holly.
So when you're putting all that together and getting ready for a show, how do you go about that? Does that come from you and it's transported to your group? Is it a collaborative process? How does that happen?
Yeah, it's all of the above. You know, for me, obviously that's where my head is. So as a result, the group is used to me talking in that language. But again, like we'll come to a workshops and sometimes I can tell their brains are exploded because they're just like, what are you making us do and think about? Why do I have to stand here in silence and emote? What is that supposed to mean? Like, just try it. But it comes all the way around. So for example, some members of my group are Japanese born and have immigrated to the US. And you know, sometimes they'll be like, oh, can we do this? We had this idea of something we're working on. And I'll say, yes. And then they'll work on it by themselves and they'll bring it to me. And it will be this lovely medley of their hometown folk songs. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous and it's beautiful. Now tell me, where did the song come from? Why did you choose it? Why do you love it? And they'll share, and then the whole group will understand why this piece is precious to them, why they're sharing a part of their history and home with us. And then we put it in the concert in a place where, you know, is just sort of kind of the sweetest, kind of most intimate spot in the concert. And then at the end of the concert, like some of the feedback is like, oh, that was my favorite part, you know, and we had them talk at the microphone, sharing why they chose this or where these pieces come from. And it wasn't me saying like, I have this brilliant idea for a Japanese medley, please, here are your assignments, go. But it came from this idea of something they wanted to share. So I helped create the space for them to do that, and I helped shape it once we got it to the stage. But it was really came from them saying like, oh, this is something that is important to me and I just want to explore. Maybe it's not good enough. You know, it was always like, well, I don't know if it's good enough, or we're not ready yet to show you. And I just be like, just show me what you have. I don't care. Just show me. And it's beautiful because it came from that place. It didn't come from I want to show off. It came from I want to share, and it was gorgeous. So some ideas I like to think, yes, I'm brilliant. I came up with that amazing idea and everybody, you know, got behind me and made it happen. But mostly I find that if I say yes to somebody, I'm always rewarded because it's coming from such a pure place. So it's getting people to feel comfortable to come forward and do that. Yeah.
So as a question in that process, what are the kinds of things that you did with this piece that was brought to you by these older Japanese ladies to make it stage worthy for a concert? What are some of the things you?
Oh, you know, just sort of simple things where I'd be like, oh, this song repeats 3 times. So the first time you do it, let's do it this way. The second time, let's add harmony. And then the third time, let's, you know, add this other layer of drumming and some movement. Mm-hmm. Okay, suddenly now it has a shape instead of just a song 3 times, you know, and actually this song should go first, this song should go second, we'll finish with this song, and maybe we'll have you guys here, and then the other song will come in here, and then you'll move around there, and then we'll kind of travel across the stage till we get to the last song, you know, just little stuff like that. So it's not just somebody walking up, standing, and then leaving, but that you're sort of like musically transitioning in and out of this sort of nostalgic, sweet kind of feeling.
Great. Does anyone else, I had one other question, but I can wait if somebody else has comments or.
I have a question.
Yep.
Yeah. It might lead into a big discussion, but
I have a note so I can get back to mine later.
speaking of being moved and big projects and awesome ideas, can you talk a little bit about Herbeat?
I can always talk about Herbeat.
Because before you talk about it, I just want to say, Jen, that even thinking about it now, it was one of the most moving experiences I've ever had in Taiko. To have that stage occupied by all of these women filling in roles that we don't normally get to see them do. We get to see women do, and it was just looking back at it now, I still get teary. So can you talk
yay.
a little bit
in the
about
documentary, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, this was a simple idea. It was Tiffany's idea. Of saying like, you know, like, what's your dream project? What's your dream project? Well, my dream would be to bring the best female players from Japan and North America together and do a concert together, you know, because she's like, I've been around doing this for 30 years and I honestly thought by now there'd be more of me, but I show up and it's still just me. Why aren't there more of me? And so we were just kind of talking about that and wondering, you know, what are we going to do about that? How can we create more space? How can we celebrate how incredibly awesome we are? And as you know, it's very expensive to collaborate with other artists and to bring in guest artists. So I thought, oh, that's a brilliant idea. And it's nutty because who can ever afford to bring in that many guest artists? Especially then, and do a show for them and not for like your own group, you know, like it's kind of like a producer role in a way. But the idea stuck, and then I kind of pitched it to a couple people and a couple funders who said yes, and then suddenly we were doing it. And it happened went from a pipe dream to a real thing very quickly. And then the next thing was like, okay, well, who's on your dream list of artists you would want to collaborate with? And then I asked Tiffany, I asked Iris, I asked Michelle Fuji, I asked Chieko-san, and people got their lists. And so I started finding them on Facebook, and some of them I'd never met, and just like introduce myself and say, I've got this idea for a project. If we get the money, would you want to come? And people started saying yes. And then suddenly we had this all-star roster of these incredible people. And so my goal was to have a diverse group of people. So it wouldn't be, all of sort of Tiffany's best friends, even though that's awesome and many of them are, but that it would, really kind of fill the stage with a diverse group of women in terms of careers, locations, styles, everything, just to kind of get a real a diverse talent pool of some of the best, and then have faith that they know what they're doing, and let's show up and put a show together. And so the idea was, I could close my eyes, and if we had to put a show together in 12 hours, we probably could, because the talent in the room could put together a show in 12 hours. That would be amazing. But we took 2 weeks working, morning through night. I took 3 weeks off of work, and we just went for it. And it was insanely challenging. The language, the people got sick, and got the flu. We don't know if it was the flu or COVID, but a lot of us got sick. And then you have, 18 leaders, artistic leaders, people who are used to telling people what to do and know how to do it their way, because that's what they've been working on for the last 20, 30, 40 years, in a room together, and then say oh, okay, we need to make a concert. What's going to be on the concert? Well, here's Jen Weir's first guess. It should be this, 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 and this. So you guys get together for 3 hours. You guys get together for 3 hours, and then we'll see what we can do, And so some of the things were very collaboratively created. Some of them were more like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I'm just going to rehearse it, But what happened is Nicole, I got shivers every rehearsal, right? Because if you're oh, Chieko-san and Kaoli-san are going to be in the same rehearsal, and Chizuko is going to give them some masks, and we're going to create this whole thing, and it's happening in front of you in real time, and to your point of, am I ever, where you might not feel ready for something, like as a director, like who am I to tell these women what to do or how to do it? But you do need a director when you have, 18 people. So it was kind of my job to try and figure out when people need direction and when they need space to just do what they do, and to try and figure out that kind of balance as best as I could. What was interesting is that I think in North America, this idea of collaboration is something we're more comfortable with and have more reference for. In Japan, it's like, what? Like Sheiko-san collaborates with North American taiko groups, or, groups around the world. But in terms of Japanese collaboration, that's very unusual. You're like, I'm Koto, I'm this, I am that, and you're in your silo, and you're in your dojo and you do what you do, but you don't get a chance to interact with other people at that level. And so for them to have all these different styles, and then to come together and create something together and to get to know each other, and all of that was a real new thing. It was like something that does not happen. So we had that going on, and then we also had the North American Japan thing, because that's sort of like big sister, little sister kind of dynamics, where you're like, don't tell us what to do, we know how to do this too. Yeah, but you guys are so American, like that whole kind of thing, going on too. And then just, it's the dead of winter and we're just trying not to get sick. And so it really pushed people beyond their comfort zone on every level. Like every single person was pushed. And the result was this incredible concert. Like I really thought it was amazing, and I'm so proud of it. That just like couldn't happen on in any normal kind of way. Like it was such an extraordinary, unique opportunity for these people to work together, that the resulting what you saw on stage was so explosively interesting and exciting and celebratory that it was like there was no like people were just truly giving their all in every way, like as an artist, as a performer, as a human being, and there was no way you could not feel that. So yeah, so that was, I mean, it was such a, like I almost had PTSD from it because it was so intense. But it was such a privilege, when you talk about just kind of being with some of these incredible artists and watch them and help them and create space for them to do their thing, how amazing it is. And you realize how often people, even amazing artists, are limited and have to work so hard to create space for themselves, that if you give them the space, they can do anything, So yeah, so that was sort of like the biggest, most ambitious thing I've ever done in my life, and probably ever will do. I would love to see someone else do another one. And I'm excited about the documentary film, which is a whole other thing, to have like a camera person around 24/7. Like that doesn't add some tension and exhaustion on top of everything. But yeah, it was such a unique experience, and I learned so much about having faith in artists and the artistic process. Even when it was one that was not one I felt comfortable with or was my, safe zone, I'd just be like, nope, this is going to work out. And I just had to have faith that these people are gonna deliver, and they do, Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Two of the thoughts that came up to me in my mind as you were talking is this phrase, the gift of the unplanned. It's one of the things I love about working with Tiffany.
Both a frustration and a gift.
Because you have but although sometimes when things are not planned and you don't know what's happening, what happens when you're working with, if you commit to the process and you have that faith, what can come out of it is something that so much mightier than you could have ever conceived of before the process began.
Yeah, that's something I am constantly reminded of as a director, that my idea is a starting point. It is not the end point for anything that we do, you know. So I have something I wanted to share with you. Did anyone have any more questions or comments right now? Yeah, Rachel.
I just wanted to ask if you could elaborate a little bit on what you said about the artists having trouble creating space for themselves, but then when you do give them space, they like flourish. I just wanted to.
Oh, well, it's just that thing that I think I feel like in Taiko right now, there's nothing that keeps women from participating and bringing your best and bringing your all. But there is something that you butt up against when you try to get to that next level of a professional touring sponsored Taiko player. So when it comes to the leaders, the workshop leaders, the world touring artists, the sponsored by Miyamoto artists, you know, all of that kind of stuff, it's so much harder for women to gain traction there, and that's shifting, you know, slowly. Yay! But it's really hard. And so the women who have been doing it now for a long, you know, for many years, not just sort of the recent breakthroughs, but let's say the Chieko-sans or Tiffany-sans who have been doing this for decades, have had to create space that doesn't exist because there's not a reference for someone like them. Because in their Taiko group, that didn't exist before they showed up. And then they had to prove again and again and again and ask again and again and again and sort of shoulder their way into the space where they get to make artistic decisions, where they get to be featured, where they get to be sponsored. And that comes after years and years and years and years of persistence and resilience. You know, because I think now of like a Chieko and I think, oh, she's so brilliant. She's such a gift to the art and to the community. How could she not have sort of been valued every moment of her career? But, you know, she spent the first decade of Taiko studying Taiko, but not allowed to perform. Period. So she became a dancer. You know, like, what? Oh, okay. And then Hana Hachijo became popular because PJ helped her get it on the program at the North American Taiko Conference and became so popular outside of Japan that then she created almost her own genre, niche of Taiko that didn't exist before her, and it didn't come from Japan and from her group. It came from outside wanting her to do that. So people have been so creative and had to keep coming and had to not give up and had to create sort of their own unique, like, you know, with a hatchet through the jungle forest, you know, carve their path to these careers that now that they're there, I kind of take for granted. Like, of course Tiffany would be amazing, of course Chieko would be amazing, but how they got there was a very treacherous path, and they do it so gracefully. And so then to do something like Herbeat, where you're saying like, okay, I'm bringing you here not so that you can teach my group, or not that you can, so that you can, you know, teach songs to my group or help out our group, but so that we can create a space for you as artists to create together, for, you know, this like kind of professional artist to create your own kind of colleagues that you might pass in the night but never get to actually work together. So creating that space was a really new thing. And so of course no one knows how it's going to work, or, you know, if I were to do it again, I have many suggestions, you know, but that this big experiment of, if you invite the right people to the table, amazing things are going to happen. you know, and I don't know how they're going to happen because no one's done it before, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be awesome. And it was. But in that way of like, this space hasn't been created. Like often if you're going to do something like that, it would be a showcase where you would get your allotted time slot, you would play the songs that you always play, they would put you in a lineup and you wouldn't get to interact with anybody at all except for maybe a curtain call at the end. Where this was like, no, you're living together in the same house, you're sharing meals, you're rehearsing, you know, 10 hours a day for 2 weeks straight, and then what you're going to create in that time is what we're going to see on stage. So that was a big experiment and a new space that didn't exist before. So in that way, I was telling my taiko group, like, this is the best gift that you can give the taiko community. Like, if you never do another thing, never volunteer for another thing, the fact that we've spent the last 2 years to make this happen and set aside all the things that you've done to like support this effort, is you've got that, you can check that box, you know.
What I really liked about the space that was created in Herbeat is that all of these artists have spent their careers making that niche for themselves. Tiffany is an Odaiko player. Chieko-san is Hanahachi Joe and this beautiful dancer, and they kind of get stuck in these molds of who they are as professionals. And I think what Herbeat did was take them from being stuck in that mold to being able to artistically show that they can do other things.
Yeah,
well.
like I was hoping that everyone would get to shine and do the thing that they do, and also have the opportunity to take risks and do things they wouldn't normally be asked to. So for example, Mizue-san was playing Odaiko. She never plays Odaiko on stage. She always plays set, you know, things like that, where it's just like, you know, Mayumi-san, who plays the Odaiko, like Tiff, she is not used to like being in a let's create it on the fly collaborative environment. She was like terrified, like that I wouldn't be able to remember it or know what to do, and she was great, you know, things like that. My dog is scratching to go outside. I'll be right back. Hold that thought.
Speaking of, I've got to go let my dog in.
Pet break. Yeah, everybody, let's just 20-minute stretch. So I think we said we'd go an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, I believe is that what?
To 6:45 is what we had said.
Oh, okay, 6:45. So if you can think of any other questions, I have one I want to end off with, and I know she wants to bring an activity to us. So I think I'm going to ask her to do the activity next. So we make sure we get that in, and then we'll see if we have time. So yeah,
so that was the idea behind that.
Yeah, first of all, I want to tell you, somebody has to be first, and it's amazing. And you know, you're always going to look back at that and think, oh, I would do this differently or something differently. But someone always has to be first, and not only find their way through the miasma of the unknowns, but also take the criticism for the things they left out or didn't think of, because the people who do things first are naturally going to leave things out and whatever. And you guys did so beautifully, and I just want to applaud you for the effort you put in, and what an impact it had on the taiko community in general.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And I want to ask you to move to your activity, because we have till 6:45, and I want to make sure we get your activity in, whatever it is. Before I ask I have a couple questions to end off with, but.
Sure. Well, this is just a simple thing, and it kind of touches on all of the conversation, and it's just like a Jen Weir philosophy or a Jen Weir kind of way of looking at things. And I call this, and I'll type it in the chat just so you can see it in print. I call this the evolution of a taiko player.
This might actually answer part of my question.
So this is a really simple kind of way of looking, at least to me, of the different ways that my particular community like engages with taiko. And the idea is that there's not a straight line progression or journey through this, and there's not, and it's not exclusive. So you can be all of these things at once, or you could be one of these things, or you can move from one to the next, you know, or be several at any given time. So it's just a different way of thinking about them. But in at least in my life, this is kind of sort of an evolution of my relationship with the art form, I would say. And so the first one is student, which is obvious when you're learning the art, and I feel like this role stays with most of us for the entirety of our lifetime with Taiko. You're always learning, you're always wanting and hungry to learn, hopefully, but that most of us come to Taiko as a student. And then, whether you want to or not, you often find yourself in a performer role, which is some of what we were talking about, where you have to take that relationship with the drum and you have to somehow translate it to an audience of what is that relationship, that energy exchange, the thing you're trying to express, the feeling you have inside that you've found with you and the drum. How can you now get that out to an audience or to the public, or share it beyond yourself? So almost how can you magnify that impact of that expression and that experience? So, you know, performing and becoming a performer, getting comfortable performing, understanding what that is and what the sort of different tricks and tools and ways of crafting that message are. Then it goes to artist, and this is sometimes where people kind of get hung up on, I'm an artiste, or what is an artist versus not an artist, and everyone's definition is different. For me, an artist starts to question things, and when you're not just trying to perform and do a good job and play well and play, but you're also trying to say something or question something or explore something or have a voice. Like, what is your voice? Who are you? What do you have to share? What are you bringing to this art form? How is this art of Taiko or our group different and unique because you specifically are here? And what about you as an individual or as a community member at large? What do you think we need to say with our art, and why? So those questions, and when you have those kinds of questions and when you have that kind of perspective, I feel that starts to turn you from evolve you from a performer into an artist. And that's when you start creating melodies or creating songs, or you start kind of really thinking some kind of deeper questions and about who you are, and how does that show up in your work, and how does that reflect you, and how do you reflect it, and you know, what's that relationship and identity and art, and you know, all of those things kind of start cooking up there. But it's a chance to be creative, and it's a chance to create new things, and it's a chance to like add your voice to the ever evolving traditions of Taiko and such. Then I have ambassador, and that's when you're like, I am a true believer, whether I'm playing Taiko or not, whether I've played for 20 years or 5 days, I want the world to know how awesome Taiko is. I want to bring more people. I want to expand our community. I want to see Taiko grow. Like, you just become like a believer of Taiko and sort of a champion, I guess, in wanting to share Taiko with other people. And some people come in and go from student to ambassador, and they're just like happy as clams. That's it. You know, they're your what do you call that when you have a athletics team and they're supported by somebody?
Like a booster club?
Booster club, yeah, like the Taiko Booster Club, right? You know, they're volunteering, they're bringing in donors, they're becoming donors themselves, things like that. And then this next one is where I feel like I've been lately, even more so than a performer, is steward. And to me, this is saying your relationship is what do I care about in terms of the well-being of the art form and the community beyond myself? So beyond my personal interest, what do I want to continue? What do I want to contribute so that Taiko stays healthy for everyone, not just me or not just my group, you know, or maybe it is for my group. How can I keep Taiko sustainable in my community because it's so hard, you know, and that shows up in things like money and donations and time and volunteering, but it also shows up in this way of thinking again beyond sort of the immediate self-interest. Like when you start thinking about like, oh, serving on the Taiko boards for a TCA, you know, that's something that you're thinking of as a steward, where you're, or volunteering for things like that, or where you're trying to do things that help like the community at large or the art form at large. And you know, what your hopes are and dreams are for the future beyond your immediate self-interest. And so you can be all of these things at once. You can go from one to the other. You can, and sometimes they're in conflict with each other. Like the student in me wants to really get it right and have 10 more weeks of rehearsal before the performer in me is forced to just show up and go for it. And maybe the artist in me is getting like hung up on the deeper philosophical meanings that I don't think our whole group is behind, but the, you know, ambassador in me is going to sell tickets anyway. And, you know, like all of those things can like sometimes have conflicting interests at mind, but also can kind of play and make a weaving, I guess, of your relationship with the art in many ways. And it's fine to just stay ones. Like I have students who are happy to be Taiko students and that's all they never ever need to be, and they love it, and it's awesome, you know. And I have folks who like are donors, are happily donors, never need to take a class, will always come to our concerts. They're happy being donors, and that's all they need to do, you know. So it can be a constant mix and things, but that's for me kind of a way to look at all the kind of stakeholders we have in our community, and different ways that they can engage with us and with the art form. Any question? That was a lot of talking. Any questions or thoughts about that?
I love the structure or the possibilities.
Yeah, and I just found it useful for framing, you know, sort of like what my priorities are at any given moment,
Right.
and why I'm focusing on one thing versus the other, you know.
Cool. Well, my question, if anybody, does anyone else have things they want to say? Because I wanted to kind of close out with a question that might concern several people on this Zoom meeting directly. But if anybody has any questions or comments about,
are we going to do closing words at the end?
Yes, we will do.
Okay, then I'll just wait.
Okay. So because I'm in the position of founding and leading this group, there's a couple things that, and I know most of the students, probably everyone, has heard me say, which is I feel like my job is to help people get out of their own way when it comes to Taiko. That's my job as a teacher, is that, you know, helping people stop being an obstacle to them, to giving the joy that they feel to other people. And the other thing I say is, shoot, I think I'm forgetting, but I can pass. Does anyone remember the other thing I always say? Well, it'll come to me. But they both had to do with the self and the group. So what are things that, not specifically, in general, I want you to talk about, what are things that people themselves bring to the group, and what are things that the group provides for the person who's involved in Taiko, which is a huge question, I know. But specifically, what I want to ask you is, do you have advice for, there's several people who are going to be giving their first performances very soon. They're going to be filmed. This festival where we usually debut all of our new students is going to be filmed. It's going to be virtual this year. So on the 18th, we're going to go and film, and some people will be performing for the first time. So do you have advice? And it's not that I want you to talk directly about the self and the group thing. I want you to think about that as kind of a milieu. You give advice to these new performers on how to have fun, succeed, and maybe some relationship that they put themselves into with the group and the audience, because there will be some people watching, I'm sure, because Taiko's loud, that will help them get through the ordeal of their first performance.
Well, I always say nobody comes to see taiko to watch a perfect performance. Like, the goal is not perfection and to not make mistakes. The goal is to show yourself and show up and be passionate, you know, to share whatever is that spark, the joy, the challenge, the way that taiko brings out your best self, and to share that with other people. Yes, and of course, like anything, it's like practice makes perfect. So performances, you have to practice that, getting over that feeling of being self-conscious or nervous or things like that. But it's a, you know, at the end of the day, it's a gift to be able to share our art and to just be grounded in that. And that's my suggestion.
Tips and tricks when you talked about moving from player, you know, for your performers. Do you have any tips and tricks, like really easy stuff to remember, bullet points?
For me, it's your face. And it's not about smiling so much as it is about sharing how you feel on the inside with your face. In the Midwest, there's very much that Scandinavian stoic, you know, kind of thing. And I know even with some of our Japanese-born players that there's a similar kind of thing where, you know, you put your game face on with the public versus showing your vulnerable, true, bright spirit self. And so, you know, think of it as letting your kid come out and play. Is kind of your inner kid come out and play. This is sort of helpful sometimes.
That's perfect. All right, well, I didn't quite get my question squeaked out, but you answered it perfectly, so thank you. Let's do closing words. Where's Nicole? Oh, there she is. So can you call on folks?
Yeah, so I'm just gonna go in order that's on my screen. We're gonna start with Tom.
And so you'll have to unmute yourself and then do your closing words.
All right. I am so grateful for you being here. I think that I've been hovering at performer for a long time and am very ambivalent about moving on to the next the next piece of that. And so this has given me a lot to think about in terms of what I can offer to others.
That's great.
Holly.
First, just thank you. Thank you for being here and sharing your perspective. It's a really nice addition to a new way to think about some things. And thanks for Asobi, and thanks for San Mukata, right?
Inspired.
Okay.
And the Mu in San Mukata comes from Mu Daiko.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay. So thank you. Thanks for all of it. Nice to have you.
Thank you so much.
Lynn.
Yes, I'm really glad to have been able to see you today. I'm one of these going to be first-time performers.
Woo!
And I know in just getting ready for this is most of my learning has not only been as a student, but it's been as a student on Zoom. So it's been, you know, very isolated. I am an introvert and a hermit. So this is like going to be a really big step up. But I noticed in getting ready for it that it's the whole sense of it is so much bigger. And it does feel like, okay, now I have to be present. You know, I can't hide away in my cave. I have to be here. And it's really been a wonderful step up for me. And I'm really excited about this because we have started playing in studio in very small groups, and that's really been fun. But I'm really excited about the feeling like a village. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Rachel.
So I do come from a performing background. I taught theater, high school theater for 2 years. So there was like
hero.
You went on like a little monologue about what it means to like plan a performance, and I just wanted to like clap my hands because and it was just, you know, all these pieces that not everybody sees. It's like the behind the scenes, and it's like kind of, you know, what Karen and Nicole are doing and all the hats they're wearing and everything they're thinking about to create something that is moving. And I really like that, you know, you pointed out that at the end of the day, what makes a good performance is what everyone brings of themselves on stage. And with Taiko, I remember when I started, like the thing that stood out to me the most was that joy. Like everybody coming together, joyful together was like, whoa. Like you don't see that in other types of art forms so much. So yeah, I was just like, oh, this is so exciting. It's kind of, it inspired me. So thank you.
Oh, yay. Woo.
Raquel.
Thank you for being here. Lot to think about, and a lot to think about, and lots of good nuggets of trying to remind myself, taking notes, that performing is contributing. And I don't know when I'll get to feel beyond student.
Thank you. Connie.
I'm one of the beginning students also who's going to be performing for the first time. But what I've missed the most in Zoom is when the group comes together and they breathe together and we all end together, and it just feels so good. And that's what I'm hoping to come out of this performance. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Awesome.
Heather.
I'm just, thank you for being here. Thanks for Karen and Nicole for bringing you here to share with us. I just remember seeing other people perform Taiko and the joy and energy they brought, and I would love to be able to do that when I perform. So that's my goal, to learn how to do that. So thank you.
Let's go to Karen Carson.
Thanks so much, Jen, for being here. It was really enjoyable to hear about your whole process, and I'm really looking forward to the documentary. That's going to be awesome. And I'm one of the newbies, so I've done public speaking and environmental education, but never anything what I consider a skill set. So it's going to be fun. I enjoy the community. I really love playing as a group, and like Connie said, it's going to be so nice to be with a bigger group of people and playing together, which I think is so wonderful. What I missed about other kinds of things I did, it's nice to be in a group instead of just on your own. So we'll hope for the best, and and I think we're gonna have a great time. So thank you very much. It was really nice.
Ishani.
Yeah, thank you for coming and joining us and sharing so much of, I think, all of your experiences and your expertise and your perspective have been really helpful, and also a little scary at times, I think, because I had been, like Tom, just very casually happy to leave the word artist entirely, like, nope, not even gonna look at it, not even gonna consider it. And I think something that I've been thinking about it for like the last hour and a half, and probably been making faces on the recording about it, is this idea of being an artist doesn't necessarily have to come out through the act of like playing taiko. Maybe it comes out through the creation of a bigger sort of structure, or through the design of a set, or through like the arrangement of pieces. And that's a big idea that I'm going to be maybe grappling with for a while, but I really like it. And I'm glad to have had your thoughts on it, because I think you are somebody who really brings so much of that to the work you do, is the impression I get. And so it was really helpful. Thank you.
Oh, yay. Thanks.
I'm going to go, then Karen will go, and then we'll have you say your closing words, Jen. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really lovely to see you and just to hear you talk about things, because I haven't actually ever heard you talk about your process and where you come from with taiko, but it's very evident and very clear in seeing the performances you put together and being part of them that there is a huge theatrical umbrella over what you do and what you bring from your players. So thank you for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. Karen.
This has been incredibly awesome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our September guest, Jen. I have so valued the many years that we've been circling around each other like planets. But I will never forget this moment when you stepped up to play Pebbles, Stones and Pebbles. Do you remember that? You probably don't even remember the song because you didn't really know it. It was Eileen Parker's song. And you were just thrown into it and didn't really know it. And you just busted it up. You did so great. And it was like, I was like, oh my God, she's acting. I mean, you looked like you knew that song upwards and downwards. And I just have always remembered that moment. So when I say
acting,
a way to say get out of your way to perform, because that's how I felt when I saw that. I realized what was keeping me from performing was that I was standing in my own way. And I saw in you someone who completely was not standing in their own way when they got to the drum. They didn't even need to know the song. That's how good you were. So it is a thrill to have you here. So thank you so much.
Oh, well, thanks for having me. You know, I'm always nervous of like, what could I possibly say? My wife Megan would say that I'm one of the more lazier taiko players in the North American circuit. But it's fun to talk about the things that I do feel like, you know, in that way that like my approach or my perspective that I feel like I can contribute in some way. So that feels really good, even when I'm not the one who will, you know, be bleeding at the fingertips from rehearsing 7 hours in a row. But I love to. That's Megan. I love to coach and direct and to bring that out in others. So it's fun to even see that sparkle in your eyes. So thank you so much for having me here today.
Let's bow out.
And if you could hang out just a few minutes, Jen, and we'll say.
Sure.
Wow, it feels so dark. All right. Hey. Arigatou gozaimashita. Otsukaresama deshita. Thank you, everybody. We will see you. Well, I'll be seeing some of you tomorrow. And some
Good to
break
see
a leg.
Bye.
Good to see everybody. I think we can live stream it, so we'll invite you, Jen.
Oh, cool.
Karen, you can stop recording now.